AITA for revealing my wife's asexuality after she let her friends attack me? A little backstory. Been together 9 years, married a little over 3. We both had incredibly high sex drives in the beginning, and like normal, after some time, they began to come and go. We used to never go more than a few days without having sex. We got married just before the pandemic, which might have added to things, but the long and short of it is after some personal therapy at the beginning of 2020, my wife concluded that she was asexual and mostly had sex for my benefit, and to maintain the relationship. Looking back, I can kind of see it now. It would have been nice to know beforehand, but it is what it is. She still offers sex once in a while because she knows I want to have it, but I turn it down every time. It's no fun having sex with someone just doing it for your benefit. If I'm going to have sex with someone, they should actually want to have sex with me, not just for maintenance. Fast forward to this past Friday. We went to a party at one of her friends' house. I know a few people, so it's never too bad, although I'm not a big party guy. As usual, we end up being one of the last to leave. The last hour or so of these parties are usually chill. Just sit around in the living room, chat, catch up. It's quiet, but the conversations eventually turn sexual and personal. And I hate it, honestly, for obvious reasons. Namely, having to hear all these women talk about how much they love having sex with her husbands, partners, and all the things they do, and knowing I'll never have that. The worst part, though, is my wife makes up all these wild stories and things we do, not even have done in the past. Just flat out lies, but because she's embarrassed of her asexuality, I just kind of nod along since she's not really comfortable with other people knowing. I had come back from the bathroom to them having a conversation about oral sex. One story about how someone didn't like it at first, now they love it. Another about wishing they got it more. Another about liking it more than sex sometimes. Then it comes time for my wife to talk, and they're prying for details. For whatever reason, my wife decides to tell the truth and say that she can't remember the last time someone went down on her. Of course, she left out the key bit of context, which turned into this group haranguing of how I need to put in more effort, how my wife probably gives me head all the time and I don't return the favor, and how it's typical of men to be selfish lovers. I took it for a few minutes, hoping my wife would jump in and stop it. She just kept quietly saying, it's okay, I don't mind, he does other stuff, blah blah blah. But they kept going. Finally, one of her friends, who as an anecdote I fucking despise because she's overly confrontational for absolutely no reason, demands to know why I don't eat my wife out more often, in a room full of like 9 other people. I look to my wife and ask if she'd like to chime in, but she doesn't. I shrug and say that I actually really enjoy performing oral sex on women, but that my wife doesn't let me because we don't have sex. My wife's face dropped as she shot a look at me. I didn't even explicitly say she was asexual. I just said we didn't have sex, and haven't for a few years. When further harassed about it, she immediately begins apologizing for me, explaining that things have been rocky so we haven't been having sex much, which I immediately shut down because that's not even remotely true. If anything, things have been great lately. If she's been having issues or doubts, this would be my first time hearing them. I finally gave up. I told my wife I was going home, but she said she wasn't done yet or ready to leave. I logged into Uber on her phone so she could use my account and told her she can take it home or stay the night, but that I would not sit here and be a punching bag because she was too ashamed to admit she was asexual. My wife immediately ran to the bathroom, and I was told to leave. She came home not long after me and hasn't spoken much to me since except to half-heartedly apologize, but that outing her like I did was worse. I apologized for outing her, but that she didn't leave me much choice. A few of her friends have messaged me calling me every name up and down the book and saying they're going to convince her to leave me. 1 or 2 of the boyfriend's husbands messaged me and said they were sorry and didn't know and offered to buy me a beer if I wanted. Another of the friends, in an openly poly relationship, actually offered to have sex with me, which I showed my wife immediately. She says she knows it must have been shitty to sit there and take it, but that they're not really my friends. So some momentary discomfort from people I don't really associate with isn't comparable to her prolonged discomfort of significant people in her life, now knowing she's asexual. I completely disagree, but can kind of see where she's coming from. Update 1. My wife asked me if I would come with her to a therapy session. I was a bit apprehensive about it, because she's very private about her therapy to the point where she won't even let me drive her to the appointment, but I agreed. We get to the appointment, and the therapist asks me to wait a minute while she gets settled in. Shortly after, she calls me in and introduces herself. I sat down, and she asks why I think, wife's name, asked me to come today. I said I figured it had to do with her being asexual. Honestly though, I thought maybe my wife needed a safe space to say she wants to split up, so I was pretty nervous about the whole situation. My wife sort of nods along, and as the conversation progresses, I gave my perspective of the incident at the party. The next bit felt like a classroom lecture. Specifics about asexuality, explanation of it being a spectrum, how lack of desire doesn't mean not enjoying sex, and so on. The therapist turns to my wife and asks if she'd like to speak now or if she'd like her to do it for her. My wife tries, but whatever words she wants to say aren't coming out. The therapist goes on to explain that my wife wants to make an effort to have a sexual relationship with me, not out of guilt, maintenance, or my benefit, but because it's something she now wants to pursue. She asks how I feel about that, and I just answer honestly with more or less what I've said here. I don't feel like it's mutually fulfilling for two people to have sex if only one person has any desire for it. I admit that I don't understand how her having sex with me is not being done strictly for my benefit, but my wife starts sobbing and tells me that despite being at peace with being asexual, she really wants to want me that way. I try to reassure her that she isn't broken or needs to be fixed, which are things she's told me she feels like, but she says it's something she desperately wants in her life. She begins telling me how supportive of her I've always been, how amazing I am, how much she loves me, and how happy she is to find someone who actually loves her. The therapist cuts in and asks if I'd at least give it a try, and that if it still makes me uncomfortable, then I can just admit that since we already have communicated that well to each other. I'll admit I wasn't comfortable with it, but with seeing my wife cry because it's something she does want to make an effort into, I said I would. We talked about it some more, and my wife concluded that she will ask me when she's ready to take that step. Nothing happened in a little over a week since that therapy session. One day, my wife called my office and asked if could get out early. Admittedly, I kind of wrote off anything happening, so it didn't factor into my mind. It wasn't unusual to ask me this anyway. There have been days where she's been pretty low, and I have a pretty flexible work schedule, so knocking out a few hours early wasn't something new. I asked if everyone was okay, and she said she just wanted me to come home, so I did. When I got in, the curtains had all been drawn, and she had lit a candle in the kitchen. When I walked into the kitchen, she was completely naked and bent over the counter. I won't go too far into the details, except when I tried asking what she was doing, she cut me off and said I wasn't allowed to talk until after. Things have been really good since then. I've gone to some more sessions with her to try and understand her more. A lot of our sex is still me pursuing her, but there have been times where she spontaneously climbed on top of me or unzipped my pants while watching TV. When we were walking home from dinner once, she pulled her dress down to flash me her breasts. She had seen it in a movie we watched and thought I'd get a kick out of it. Maybe she doesn't desire people sexually or feel that usual sexual desire, and part of that does still bother me a little. But she seems happier now, and she seems to enjoy our sex life. I'll admit I've gotten kind of used to being flatly asked, "Do you need a blowjob today?" even if the approach is more mechanical than anything else. Unrelated, but she's more or less cut her friend group off. There was some other weird stuff going on that I won't get into, but she said how they've been after the whole incident has made her uncomfortable. She started a new job and made some new friends from hobbies, and they all seem great. It feels like forever since she's been this happy, and it feels like I'm dating her for the first time all over again. Anyways, that's it. This'll be the last update. Sorry if it was a bit long-winded.